I'm watching something extraordinary unfold right now. Friedrich Merz, the man who could become Germany's next chancellor, just stood in front of the Bundestag and did what no mainstream politician has dared to do in years. He didn't criticize a specific policy. He didn't attack a single decision. He questioned whether the European Commission itself still works. The room went silent, not the polite silence of parliamentary procedure, but the cold silence of institutional shock. Because when the leader of Germany's largest party asks if Brussels is broken, the entire architecture of European power starts to crack. I need you to understand the timing here. This isn't happening in a vacuum. Just 48 hours ago, Ursula von der Leyen stood in Strasbourg defending a $340 billion climate fund that nobody can fully explain. The budget documents are 1,847 pages long. The implementation timeline stretches to 2045. And Merz just held up a single sheet of paper, looked directly into the camera, and said the 4 words that are now exploding across German media. Where is the money? The question landed like a grenade, because everyone in that chamber knows the answer. The money is everywhere and nowhere. It's in green transition funds that fund consultancy firms. It's in digital transformation budgets that disappear into procurement black holes. It's in emergency pandemic recovery schemes that somehow became permanent bureaucratic empires. And Friedrich Merz, with the cold precision of a corporate lawyer, just ripped the curtain away. Let me take you inside the moment. Merz didn't shout. He didn't pound the lectern. He spoke with the quiet authority of someone presenting evidence in a boardroom. He cited Article 310 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, the clause that mandates budgetary transparency. Then he displayed a leaked internal memo from the Commission's Directorate General for Budget dated February 3, 2026. The document shows $12.4 billion allocated to something called the Strategic Autonomy Preparedness Fund. The problem? No member state parliament ever voted on it. No public hearing ever discussed it. It simply appeared in a supplementary budget revision under emergency powers. This is where the story turns from political theater into constitutional crisis. Merz isn't just attacking von der Leyen. He's attacking the entire system of governance that has emerged in Brussels over the last decade. A system where the Commission proposes, the Parliament rubber stamps, and national governments discover the details months later buried in technical annexes. He called it regulatory feudalism. The German press is calling it the earthquake speech. The numbers Merz presented are staggering. Germany contributes $25.8 billion annually to the EU budget. That's more than France and Italy combined. And according to Merz's research team, German taxpayers can account for only 61% of where that money actually goes. The rest vanishes into a labyrinth of co-funding schemes, rebate mechanisms, and structural adjustment programs that even EU bureaucrats struggle to explain. He showed a chart. A massive flowchart of EU spending that looked like a neural network designed by someone having a breakdown. The Bundestag erupted in nervous laughter. Because they all recognize the truth. Nobody actually understands how Brussels spends money anymore. But here's what makes this moment truly dangerous for von der Leyen and her commission. Merz isn't some populist outsider. He's not Marine Le Pen or Viktor Orban. He's the former chairman of BlackRock Germany, a transatlantic establishment figure, someone who spent decades defending European integration. When Friedrich Merz says the system is broken, the markets listen. And they're listening right now? The euro dropped 0.3% against the dollar within minutes of his speech. German bond yields ticked up. Investors are pricing in political instability, and that's before Merz has even won the election. The reaction from Brussels was immediate and panicked. Within 2 hours, the Commission issued a statement defending its budgetary processes. They cited oversight mechanisms, parliamentary scrutiny, and the Court of Auditors. But they conspicuously avoided addressing Merz's specific question about the $12.4 billion fund. That silence is deafening, because in EU politics, what you don't deny becomes true by default. And right now, the Commission isn't denying that billions of euros are being allocated without proper democratic authorization. I'm watching the social media cascade as it happens. Merz fragt nach is trending across Germany. Political commentators are calling it the most significant challenge to EU institutional authority since Brexit, because Merz isn't threatening to leave the European Union. He's threatening something far more destabilizing. He's threatening to demand accountability, and accountability is the one thing the Brussels machine cannot survive. The timing of this confrontation is critical. Germany faces federal elections in less than 8 months. Every poll shows Merz's CDU leading by double digits. If he wins, he becomes the most powerful leader in Europe with a mandate to reform Brussels. Von der Leyen's commission suddenly looks like a lame duck administration. The entire European project, built on the assumption of German financial support and political acquiescence, faces an existential reckoning. Merz laid out 3 specific demands. First, full transparency on all EU budget lines above $100 million, published in real time on a public database. Second, mandatory approval by national parliaments for any emergency spending exceeding 2% of the annual budget. Third, an independent audit of all Commission spending since 2020, conducted by external forensic accountants, not EU bureaucrats investigating themselves. These aren't radical proposals, they're basic democratic accountability. And the fact that they sound radical tells you everything about how far Brussels has drifted from its founding principles. The fear in the European Parliament is palpable, because if Germany starts demanding answers, other countries will follow. The Frugal Four, the Nordic states, even France under the right circumstances, they're all watching this moment. Merz just gave every finance minister in Europe political cover to question the Commission's fiscal black box. And once that questioning starts, it doesn't stop. It metastasizes. It becomes a legitimacy crisis. I need to emphasize what's at stake here. This isn't just about money. It's about the fundamental bargain that holds the EU together. Member states surrender sovereignty to Brussels in exchange for economic prosperity and political stability. But if Brussels can't demonstrate that it's using that surrendered sovereignty responsibly, the entire deal collapses. Merz is essentially asking, what are we paying for? And if the Commission can't answer that question clearly, convincingly, and quickly, the European project enters terminal decline. The markets are already pricing in the possibility of a German-led revolt against Brussels spending. Analysts at Deutsche Bank just published a note warning that a Merz chancellorship could trigger the biggest reform of EU institutions since Maastricht. Bond traders are nervous. Currency speculators are positioning. Because everyone understands that when Germany says no, Europe listens. And Merz just fired the opening shot in what could become a full-scale confrontation between Berlin and Brussels. Von der Leyen now faces an impossible choice. If she opens the books and shows full transparency, she exposes the bureaucratic waste and political favoritism that everyone suspects but nobody can prove. If she refuses, she confirms Merz's accusation that the Commission operates as an unaccountable technocracy. Either way, she loses. And Merz knows it. This was a calculated political assassination, executed with precision timing and devastating effectiveness. The ultimate question hanging over Europe tonight is simple and terrifying. Can the European Union survive accountability? Or has it become so dependent on opacity, so reliant on complexity, so addicted to emergency powers and bureaucratic discretion, that transparency itself would be fatal? Friedrich Merz just forced that question into the open, and the silence from Brussels tells me everything I need to know. The emperor has no clothes. And the most powerful man in Germany just said it out loud. What happens in the next 72 hours will determine the future of European governance. Merz's team has already announced they're preparing a comprehensive dossier on EU spending irregularities to be released next week. Sources close to his office say it contains documented evidence of at least $47 billion in questionable allocations over the past 3 years. That's forensic accounting backed by leaked Commission documents and whistleblower testimonies suppressed for months. The political calculations are brutal. Von der Leyen needs Germany's support to pass her 2027 budget proposal. Without Berlin's backing, the entire fiscal framework collapses. But if she capitulates to Merz's demands for transparency, she exposes herself to potential fraud investigations. Several EU prosecutors are already watching this confrontation closely. The European Public Prosecutor's Office has jurisdiction over misuse of EU funds. One formal complaint from a member state, and von der Leyen could find herself facing criminal proceedings. I'm watching the reaction among other European leaders, and it's telling. Emmanuel Macron's office released a carefully worded statement supporting dialogue and reform. That's diplomatic code for we're not defending von der Leyen. Giorgia Meloni in Italy openly praised Merz's courage. Even the traditionally pro-Brussels governments in Belgium and Luxembourg are conspicuously quiet. Nobody wants to be on the wrong side of history when the German checkbook finally closes. The structural problem runs deeper than individual corruption or bureaucratic incompetence. The European Commission has evolved into something the treaties never intended. It's become a quasi-government with spending powers that rival nation-states, but without the democratic legitimacy or fiscal accountability that governments require. Merz is exposing this fundamental design flaw. And once exposed, it cannot be hidden again. Here's what terrifies Brussels insiders the most. Merz isn't acting alone. He's coordinating with the Frugal Four, the Netherlands, Austria, Sweden, and Denmark. These countries have been quietly furious about EU spending for years. Now they have a champion with real power. Together, they represent 35% of the EU budget contributions. If they form a blocking coalition demanding reform, von der Leyen's commission becomes ungovernable. She can't pass budgets, she can't authorize emergency funds, she becomes a figurehead presiding over institutional paralysis. The markets understand power vacuums, and they're beginning to sense one in Brussels. European bank stocks are sliding, the DAX is volatile, smart money is rotating out of euro-denominated assets and into dollar safety, because investors know that political uncertainty in Europe means economic stagnation. And Merz just injected a massive dose of uncertainty into the heart of the European project. What I'm witnessing is the beginning of an institutional revolution, not a dramatic collapse, but a slow-motion reckoning where the gap between Brussels rhetoric and Brussels reality becomes too wide to ignore. Friedrich Merz didn't start this crisis. He just named it. And in politics, the person who names the crisis controls the narrative. Right now, Merz controls the narrative. Von der Leyen is playing defense. And in European politics, once you're playing defense against Germany, you've already lost.